Okay, thank you. I was just going to actually start before we go into round table. If we could just open, please, with both Stevie and John giving us their overall impressions of the URC competition this far up until this point, because it's been such a tight race. So if you could, gents, if you could just give us an opener of what your highlights have been and what you see as the strength of this competition.
If I go first, I think certainly from my side, just how close it's been. I don't remember. I don't have the details exactly on where we were last year, the year before, but to have so many teams in contention going into the last round, and then for it to sort of flip flop around with teams jumping out, and we were like the Ospreys, that example that we kind of almost resigned ourselves to the fact they wouldn't make the sort of playoffs, and now they have. So I think that for me is just so many teams are beating each other this year. Which highlights the quality of the competition. And of course, you've got the usual suspects sitting at the top. But there's not been a runaway this year like there has been potentially in previous years, sitting in first and second. So I just think that the standard of the game, I think you see the standard across the year, but also in particular in the last sort of month, the standard and the quality of the rugby. Obviously, the weather's helped that, has been outstanding. Oh, you're on mute, Antonia.
Stevie, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think John and I and Shanks, we sort of like give predictions at the start of the season, and a few of the teams that we've sort of said were dark horses, and the likes of Connacht, who got off to a really good start and then have sort of faded away. Like, I think Shanks and I both predicted the Scarlets were going to kick on this year, and they didn't. And obviously the Sharks, who have been a massive disappointment in the URC, in particular, obviously winning the Challenge Cup, but taking nothing away from that, their league form hasn't been good enough this season. So I think at the start of the season we had expectations and hopes that some of the underdogs might come good, but the reflection is in the table, bar maybe the Ospreys who've just sneaked in there, it's the same old faces. But I feel that the other teams are narrowing that gap. I think the gap used to be much, much bigger, and just the point that John made about it being so tight, from first to 11th, really. I think that just goes to show that the league is progressing, the teams are getting better, and the gap that there's always been between Leinster and say Munster and the Stormers over the last couple of seasons is closing, and it's not closing, gradually. I think it's closing pretty rapidly, and that's only a good thing for the league. And hopefully the teams that we sort of backed last year, the Sharks, the Scarlets, Connacht, can have a good charge at it again next year and surprise a few people. And that's the beauty of a league format. You can get off to a really good start. You can get out of the blocks quick, and a couple of those teams that we mentioned did. But it's just about sustaining that, and ultimately the best teams at the end of the season finish in the top 8, and that'll be even the likes of Edinburgh. That's a huge, huge disappointment for where they were sitting early on in the season. And yeah, now it's anybody's. The teams that are in the top 8 are all playing brilliant, playing really, really well. And just lastly, like summer rugby, please, let's get to summer rugby. Like, I know it might not suit the broadcasters or suit the sponsors or whoever it may be, but you can just the brand of rugby over the last 6 weeks has just been on a completely different level. And yeah, it's not just suiting the likes of Ulster; it's suiting all the teams in the competition. Everybody's enjoying it a lot more, and John can back me up on this, and all the media that are on this call. It's a lot better to work in as well. So let's see what's around the corner.
John, would you agree with that? Summer rugby?
Yeah, I had to commentate for the first time with my sunglasses on a few weeks ago. So I'm all for it. I think the standard of games has been, it just is a better standard of rugby. And it's the traditional side of the game is that we play across winter, and everyone loves the winter derby. Of course you do. But yeah, I agree with you. I think the standard of rugby just goes through the roof in time. It all goes hand in hand. So stadiums are full, people are loving going to games. So yeah, it's maybe above our pay grade, but I can see you're keen for it.
Okay, brilliant, guys. Thanks for opening up with that. Right, we'll go to the round table now. Is there anybody? So Nathan, do you want to start, please? I can see your hand up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I please go ahead with 2 questions up front or just one?
2 questions is fine. Thanks, Nathan.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. Question for both Stephen and John. Can you guys just give us your predictions of the quarterfinals and reasoning for each fixture, please?
Oh, who should we start with?
Go on ahead, John.
I think we both think the tie of the round is the Stormers Glasgow, and what that's going to do is probably the tightest one to call. I expect, looking at the other ones, I expect Munster to win. I think that will be close enough. But I think Munster will have too much in the tank. I think the Bulls will have too much power for Benetton. So yeah, I think Leinster. I think it's really the usual suspects. I think the home wins are obviously so key to how you proceed in the competition. That's what everyone wants them. Stephen may disagree with Leinster also, and I do think Ulster have got a shot in that one. Of course, they've got a shot, but I just think there's going to be a backlash, and for Leinster to finish another season without silverware will be sort of nagging in the background. But yeah, just as I said at the start, I think the Glasgow Stormers one is probably the hardest one to call. I think Glasgow, arguably, their form's dipping a little bit at the moment, whereas the Stormers seem to be hitting their straps at the right time. Like they always seem to be under John Dobson.
Yeah, and Stephen?
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with John. I think the most important thing for me is when the teams are read out the day before the game and what teams are going to be selected. Are we going to see, I'm talking more specifically about the Ulster game. We've seen in years gone by that Leo Cullen has stuck to, and I know the season is slightly different this year with the Champions Cup final and being before the quarterfinal semi-finals of the URC, but he's been pretty good at staying true to his word with a lot of players that have been pretty consistent for him throughout the season in the URC. And will we see all those guys now being cast aside and the frontliners being brought back in again? I tell you what, if I was a Jack Conan or a Max Deegan or a Maloney or something like that, and you've given everything all season in the URC and you've got the team to where they are, and then you're completely left out of the squad for a quarterfinal, like that wouldn't sit particularly well with me. And in fairness to Leo Cullen, he has been pretty loyal to a lot of those guys, but maybe that's now out the window, Nathan. Maybe that's he's got to stop thinking like that, and he's got to go with his full strength team from now until the final if they get there. If they do that, I can't see Ulster winning, specifically because of set piece. Again, at the weekend there, the change in the momentum and feel of the game against Munster was in the scrum. They get dominated a few times, penalties early on in the season. Dan McFarlane got the sack after the Ospreys game where they got pumped in the scrum. They got pumped in the scrum against Edinburgh at home when they lost that game. I think the first game of the season set the tone. They got pumped in the scrum against Zebre away. And it's just been a huge area of concern. So with Tag Furlong, Sheehan, and Andrew Porter there, I think that's going to be a real tough one. So just to go back to my point, wait for team selection on that. And the other games, can't wait for Glasgow Stormers. I'm going to go for a Glasgow home win. I think they need to pick it up. They've sort of took their eye off the ball a little bit, but now it's knockout rugby, and John Dobson wants to see what his team are made of going away from home. He's talked about that. He said it's not a bad thing that they have to go away from home, take them out of their comfort zone, and if they win that, then they can stay over this side of the pond and have a little mini camp and maybe spring a surprise in the semi-final. The other 2 games, I can't look past Munster and I can't look past the Bulls. Benetton scored 4 tries against the Bulls only a few weeks ago and were very good with ball in hand. But maybe maybe they're a side, maybe they are the dark horse to spring a real upset in the quarterfinals. Will there be an upset? Again, team selection, I'll take it from there. But for me, it's going to be the same as John, Barclay, and 4 home wins.
All right, then finally, last question for Stephen. Stephen, we got 3 Irish sides in the top 8 and 2 South African sides as well. Special mention with the Sharks winning the Challenge Cup. We got the South African versus Ireland series coming up. How massive are these fixtures in lead up to that series?
Yeah, it's I think everybody's sort of forgotten about it until more or less the last week or so. Just because they could be coming up against each other again. And yeah, the Lions were very unlucky not to scrape through. They've probably been playing the best rugby in the competition over the last couple of weeks. But you've just left it too late. It was all about, after the Six Nations, about Ireland going to win the Grand Slam, going to go to Twickenham, and then it's going to be the Grand Slam champions, the best team in the Northern Hemisphere versus South Africa, the Rugby World Cup champions. And then, Ireland fell on their face against England and sort of took a bit of heat out of that conversation. But yeah, it's going to be an epic couple of games down in South Africa. Again, it's going to be really interesting to see what squad Andy Farrell picks. And more importantly, Nathan, I think it's going to be interesting to see what squad Rassie Erasmus picks. And if he takes some of these guys who've been playing very well in the URC, and he goes away a little bit from the old guard that's maybe we always talk about South Africa, they build and they peak at the right time, and this 4-year cycle where they just churn good results out at the right time, and maybe this might be an experimental couple of weeks for Rassie when he's playing against Ireland, as it could be for Andy Farrell. But better than most, international rugby is not a time for messing around with teams, and it's all results driven, and 1 or 2 defeats back to back, and all of a sudden your job's being questioned. So it's going to be a brilliant one, and I know there's already tour parties that have been brought together and are going to be heading out to South Africa from Ireland, and they'll be coming out in their thousands to support the boys in green, and hopefully give the Rugby World Cup champions a run for their money on their own home soil.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Nathan. Can we go over to Adam now, please?
Hey, Stephen, good to see you, mate.
Hi, Adam.
Can I ask you what you have made of Cormac Azuchukwu in the last few weeks? How impressed you've been with him, and what you think his potential is for Ulster, particularly as a blindside flanker?
Yeah, Adam, it's I don't know much about him as as an individual, or his personality, but he seems to do a lot of his talking on the pitch by his actions and how good he's been of late. He doesn't run around beating his chest either, or getting into scuffles, or throwing handbags. Are you allowed to say that anymore? I'm not sure, but yeah, he's just a really good rugby player. I know you've probably seen him a lot playing for Ballynahinch over the last season or two. He's involved in the sevens, albeit quite some time ago. He's come back from a big injury, and yeah, we had James Hume on the URC Unloaded last night, and he was just talking about how good an athlete he is. He's trying to make his body bulletproof from injury with his strength and conditioning work. He's working really hard. He takes everything on board, and yeah, he's a quality operator. The thing I like about him most is he doesn't seem to tire during games. Like, you even look at some of the best back rowers in the world. Like, they have moments, but they're brought off after 50 or 60 minutes just because they've emptied the tank. That doesn't seem to happen with him. He's a bit like I'm not saying he's on the same level as Artie Savea, but Artie Savea plays in the 80th minute the same way he does in the first minute. Just that explosive power, very fast, makes big hits. And even though that run, I think he ran through John Hodnett in defence and went 50, 60 metres. And after that, if that had been me, like, I'd have been gasping for air for probably about 20 minutes afterwards. But straight away, he's back into the game, and he seems to just keep trucking on. So a huge engine, really physical. I would like to see him up his physicality stakes in defence, get up and smash a few lads back. But that'll come. Like he's only finding his feet. And lastly, he's really good in the set piece as well. So yeah, it's something you, me, everybody within Ulster has been crying out for is a back row to have more balance and to have more ball carriers to get them over the advantage line. And who knows, maybe we've finally found, Cormac Ezechukwu, who is, even after only a few performances, I'm telling you now, this guy is right in the mix to play for Ireland. Like, it's not like you have to earn your stripes. You have to, play a couple of games for the Wolfhounds or Ireland Day, get into a couple of squads. I'm not for that. I'm all about, if you're good enough, get yourself in there, get capped, try and take that jersey off Peter O'Mahony, try and take that jersey off Ryan Baird. Like, he's playing just as good, if not better, than those guys that I mentioned. So I think Andy Farrell's probably definitely been keeping a close eye on him. Yeah, fingers crossed. Who knows what the summer, is going to throw up for him? But let's hope he goes well over the next couple of weeks.
I know you've already said that you think Richie Murphy is the right man to lead Ulster forward. What in particular have you seen over the last few weeks, especially on that run of 4 wins in a row, and even in the loss to Munster, which was a good performance, even though the result didn't go their way? Like, what do you think in particular has changed for Ulster that has them on the right path?
Yeah, I think he's 4 wins and 3 losses, is it, in the league? And everybody just forgets about the losses. It's just forgotten about because they went on a little mini run, and then yes, they lost against Munster, but they played really, really well. And I think for me, that's been the difference in the results recently. Granted, the first game away against the Sharks, when he first took over, was a bit of a non-runner, but after that, they've been really competitive, really strong. Sorted out things on the hop during games that haven't been working. They are more direct when they need to be. But the huge thing for me is that how much width they're keeping on their game. Whether that's through Ezechukwu or McCann. Like the Scarlet game away, I know it was 25 degrees in Kinethley, but it was like Ulster just had the whole pitch covered with ball in hand and really outworked the Scarlet's defence. Again, with James Hume last night on the call, he was just talking about the intensity in training, that Richie Murphy was flabbergasted at how long it was taking them from a drop ball to get back. I think, what do you say, 2.5 minutes on the clock from when they threw in their next line out to go through another, in training, that is, to go through maybe another passage of play. And Richie was just like, lads, this is not the standard that we need to be doing every week. We need to up the ante. And you can see that they look fit, they look fresh, they look that they're all comfortable with the ball in hand. And maybe Richie's just been able to let the lads play with a little bit more freedom, instead of being caged up and not worrying about making a mistake. That's what it always felt like under Dan, and you've seen that with some of the players. Adam, like Dave McCann burst onto the scene and then he was banished for 6 months. We didn't see him, and then like Cormac, jumped onto the scene, and a few other players came back on the scene, and then they just disappeared. Maybe because they had a couple of average games back to back, where Richie's just giving the guys the freedom and license to go and play. And yeah, it's much better to watch. Again, just what I was saying to Nathan there, and you'll know better than me, like the scrum is still a huge area of concern. And that's going to have to be rectified, whether they bring in a permanent scrum coach next season or Richie has his own ideas on that. But no scrum, no win is what the South Africans say.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thanks, Adam. Okay, is there any other questions for live, or we'll go into the embargoed section now for tomorrow? Okay. Simon, have you got anything for live?
Yeah, I was just going to ask John one, if that's okay. How are you, John?
Yes,
to see you again. Yeah, I enjoyed the bit of banter you had with the Ospreys earlier this season, but in all seriousness, what have you made of what Toby Booth has achieved there? If you look at the results of the other Welsh regions and the Ospreys, you know, it's like two tiers in Welsh rugby at the moment. How much of an achievement do you think that is by Toby to get the Ospreys into the last 8?
I think it's massive as far as there's quite a lot of negativity or the narrative around Welsh rugby at times, and it's quite easy to jump on that. And I think you need a beacon of hope. It sounds a bit cliche and a bit cheesy, but you think you do. And I think Ospreys have provided that. I think they've kind of been. I think they've been in and around most games they've played this year. Whereas I think you couldn't say the same for the Scarlets or Dragons or Cardiff. So I think the Ospreys have been competitive. They're playing a good brand of rugby. Like up front, I think they're probably the Welsh region where maybe they don't have the power on paper, but they for some reason, and it's probably Toby Booth, they've got a great scrum, they've got a great set piece. They don't get bullied up front by the bigger teams, because that's what you're paying for. That's what people buy, is people with big budgets buy big, powerful players. So no, I think they've been fantastic. I'm really looking forward to seeing how they go over to Munster, and how, because they've got nothing to lose really. I think for them, probably everyone's saying, "Oh, that's the achievement, you made the knockouts," but actually, maybe the season isn't done for them yet.
Cheers, John. Thanks very much.
No worries. Thanks, Simon.
Okay, we'll go to Stephen Nell next, please. And this is all now embargo content. Thank you.
Thank you very much. John, you mentioned the Glasgow Stormers being an interesting one. With the Stormers, they've been, it's been interesting to get your view on how easy some things are to fix. But we've had a situation where they struggle very much with kickoff receives. They would score and then give away the ball. And then also from a conversion rate in the red zone, lineouts, there's an issue there. Just from your experience as a player, how easy are those things to fix? I mean, is that the kind of thing that you do on the training field, or how do you go about addressing that? Because I mean, in a playoff match, surely that would be a very big issue.
Yeah, I think we had John Dobson on the URC Unloaded show, and he was. I remember one of the few takeaways from it was the kind of sense of frustration that they're doing the same things over and over, and it's those points you referenced, turning the ball over, exits, discipline, red zone efficiency, all those things. He said, we're playing as a team that's a bit naive, and we think we're going to get, chance after chance after chance. And I think you get to knockout rugby, you don't really get that. So I think that's the mentality. I think we all love the way the Stormers play when it works. But this year it hasn't really clicked, and they've persisted with that and maybe been at times a little bit careless and a bit sloppy with the ball. What I would say is that they're probably the one team, I think all the top 4 sides were probably thinking, I'm glad we're not playing you, whichever way the table fell, because of all the teams below the top 4, they are the one team, I think, that if they get it right with the players they have, the style of rugby they play, X, Y, Z in terms of power, physicality, handling, they're the team that I think are the most dangerous and the most capable of, upsetting that quarterfinal draw.
Stephen, there's one thing is quite interesting about having watched overseas teams. I know they have managed to do a few jobs on the South African teams, like Munster against the Bulls and so on. But the Highveld seems to be a very big issue in this competition. And I recall well, I covered the British Lions series in South Africa in 2009 when you were down here. And you guys seem to be able to bridge that gap. I remember, the game at Loftus, Firstfeld, for example, that was one of the most brutal games I've ever seen. And the Lions just gave as good as they got, So I just wondered, how would teams from the Northern Hemisphere get over this Highveld issue? And then conversely, South Africans are struggling with the 4G pitches. So how do the teams from the different hemispheres deal with these very serious issues that they've got?
Yeah, that's an extremely good question. And the answer to the first part of it around teams going over there, I don't think it's going to change at all, and the reason for that is because they don't have the time. Before heading out there, they're usually planning for the couple of weeks previous to that. Where before the British and Irish Lions tour, we were doing a lot of altitude training in the 2-3 weeks leading up to actually jumping on the plane. Up first thing in the morning on the altitude machine, doing fitness sessions with limited oxygen supplies, into the altitude chambers, high heat as well, heat training. And yeah, so before we even got on a flight to South Africa, our bodies were probably almost there. And I know there's nothing that really can substitute you being in a match situation with at high altitude or higher altitude. But we were prepared. Unfortunately, teams in the URC can't prepare for that. They literally can't. I don't think maybe two set altitude sessions before heading away during the week is going to be enough to be able to stem what you're going to feel when you're out there and you take the pitch. So that's the answer to the first part of that. I don't think it is going to change. And yeah, like how the coaches aren't going to be able to change the scientific evidence that tells you that you are going to struggle, like, because you're not used to it. And that's just something that they're going to have to deal with. Maybe it's a change in tactics. Maybe it's something that will be discussed during the off season by all the other coaches that are going to have to head over there next year, and that they come up with certain plans to try and slow the game down massively. We're all, the South African teams love to play really fast, so we'll see how that works out. The 4G pitches over here, again, watching the Connacht versus Stormers game there last weekend, and Stormers really found it difficult to get into the groove. And even the bounce of the ball, it doesn't skid off the surface, and very rarely does it go end over end. It sort of always pops up in the air. And again, the South African teams just aren't used to it. They're not used to that more consistently. Where I think there's maybe 6 teams over here now in the URC have the 3G pitch, which they also train on, Stephen, as well. So it's not just, okay, we're on grass all week and then we pitch up on a Friday night at Kingspan or down in Galway or wherever it may be, and they run out onto the 3G. They're practicing on it. Their movements in the lineouts, their scrumming, everything is on a 3G pitch more or less every single day. So yeah, again, how do they adapt? Maybe the South African teams look at training on a 3G pitch during the week if they can find one somewhere close by their training facilities, and try and utilize those facilities to try and better their performance the weekend.
One other thing for you is the series between the Boks and Ireland obviously going to bring up some delicious loose forward battles. Now the Boks have to, move on from Dwayne Vermeulen and Jasper Wiese is suspended. What do you make of the South African number 8 in the competition? To possibly step in there. I mean, is Roos an obvious guy, or do you see other guys as well that could step in into the Bok team?
Yeah, you're never quite sure, are you, with Rassie of what way he's going to go? Evan Ruas and John Barclay would probably agree with me here. It always feels like there's a mistake or two in him. Even though for all the good things he does during matches, and the try he scored at the weekend there is ridiculous. He's also a fiery character, and at international rugby, you cannot give away a cheap penalty. Like, you just can't do it. Maybe that's something that Rassie will be able to get out of him. Maybe he needs to grow up, a bit more maturity about the way that he plays the game. But there's absolutely no doubt that he is physical, athlete who can run at pace, who can fend, who can accelerate through contact. And is he a guy to build your team around? I'm not sure he is. Where it feels like Dwayne Vermeulen was that type of guy over the years, and the reason for that was because he was always fit, he was always there. unbelievable mauler, unbelievable, in the tight exchanges, never made a mistake, ridiculously good under the high ball, good line out option, reliable, and as Evan Ruas that at the minute, he's maybe not. There's a few other guys in the Bulls as well. Hanekom, who is pretty fresh faced and hasn't that much experience under his belt, but he's there. Marcel Coetzee, I've always been a huge fan of his, but Razzie doesn't seem to like him as much as others. I know he's been out injured a little bit as well. Elric Lowe, and we know he can play across the back row. Again, he's burst onto the scene, but maybe the last season he hasn't shown the same sort of. I don't know. I just don't think he's contributed to the bigger moments in the games that he's played this season than he maybe did over the last couple of seasons. He was the go-to guy, and that's maybe because of Hanekom, and that's maybe because of Van Staden as well, that maybe taking a bit of the shine off him. But he's also a big operator for South Africa. Am I missing anybody?
Frankie Horn, maybe.
Yeah, Franco, maybe. Yeah, good point.
Frankie Horn.
Yeah, big fan.
Hello.
Hi, Stephen.
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah, can you hear you guys?
Yeah, okay. Did you have any more questions for the guys, or can we move on?
No, you can move on. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Stephen.
Hi, Stuart, over to you now, please.
Thanks, Antonio. 2 questions for John, if I could. First of all, you've already mentioned Glasgow's faltering form going into the playoffs. I see Johnny Matthews has said this morning that knockout rugby is a different beast. Munster would suggest otherwise from last season, the momentum they had. So really, I think the issue is, how important is momentum going into the playoffs? Is it completely essential, or can teams shrug off faltering form and suddenly hit the top of their game?
I think form certainly helps. I'd rather be in a team that was full of confidence, firing off cylinders, complete understanding of how we're playing and cohesion, and connected to everyone how they're doing it. So I think that's definitely the preferred route. I'd also say that if you're someone like Glasgow has been, sitting at the top of the table or second for the whole season, you're there for a reason, or you were there for a reason. So the psychology of that is slightly different. But I just think Glasgow, that they've gone from, I thought they were going to have a home quarter, home semi, and if they won, had a home final. So I don't know whether the hangover from that Lions game in particular is sort of weighing on them slightly, because it feels like a huge opportunity missed as far as what they could have done. And they'll have to do it a slightly different way now. But yeah, you can take a leaf out of other people's books, the way Munster did it last year, even looking like South Africa in the World Cup, winning with fine margins under pressure. So it can be done. It's just a slightly harder challenge, and they've got to hit their straps this weekend, because you get it if you're off against the Stormers, and I think me and Stevie both probably think the Stormers will come to play and hit the best game. Then it could be a tough day, but I still think Glasgow have got it in them to sort of figure out and iron out the sort of creases in their game at the moment.
A question about Edinburgh too, if I could. I think Edinburgh were 90%. Were given a 90% chance of making the playoffs at one point. Their failure to do so has provoked a lot of chat about really the culture behind the scenes as well. To what extent would you say their failure this season is purely down to on-field issues, the lack of Boffelli and Darcy Graham, for instance, or is it down to, I don't know, even a complacency behind the scenes at the club?
Yeah, we were chatting about this yesterday, Stevie and I and Shanks. I think it's not too, I don't want to oversimplify it, but I think missing Darcy has made a huge difference for basically the whole year. Missing Boffelli, and I think the missing part of their jigsaw is in the centres. They need to find someone or something that can change the way they're playing, because they're stuck between two styles at the moment, and that's why you can see in their performances they've gone from that power game forward dominated on the Cockers to completely opposite under Mike. And the thought was that we'd probably land somewhere in between. And I don't think we have really yet. We're still trying to figure out who are Edinburgh, what's their DNA. I think if you said how do Leinster play, how do Glasgow play, how do the Bulls, how do the top teams play? I could tell you exactly. I'm sure you could do the same. This is how they play. This is the brand of rugby they're trying to play. I don't know how Edinburgh are trying to play the game at the moment. And that's not a great thing to be saying after 18 rounds of rugby, that you don't know the style of rugby that a team's trying to play. So I don't think they're a million miles away. That being said, I think they've got a great squad. And that's probably why people are so frustrated, because on paper, you go through that squad and there's some serious talent up front. There's some serious guys in the back line, but their attack has been, for me, I see you kind of maybe disagrees because some of their defense has been poor, but I think they had you look at how many wins they had and still only had like 1 or 2 bonus point victories. They scored so many times their victories were with just missing that bonus point. So that tells you a lot about the attack and the potency of it, rather than it being a bit more workmanlike, which it probably is.
That's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart.
Thanks, Stuart. We'll go over to Kieran now, please, and then to Derek.
Hi, Stephen. How are you?
Kieran, how's it going?
Not bad. Obviously, it's going to be up
Good.
to me to lower the tone and bring lots of negativity to this.
Oh, right.
Stephen, Ulster played Leinster, lost the playoff game, lost them all, lost 3 out of 3 in the Aviva, and I've only won 3 times in the last 25 years in Dublin. What's going to be different about Saturday?
I think the jeopardy, Kieran, at this moment in time is that everybody feels that for some reason, like, our opinion has changed just because of one result, really, or maybe 2 results over the last couple of weeks regarding Leinster, and our opinion has changed massively in Ulster over the last 3-4 weeks just because of a couple of results that they have had. If we had been having this conversation 6 weeks ago, I'd have said that Leinster were going to win by 30 or 40 points. And it didn't matter what teams were going to be played. If Leinster had picked their first choice or second choice, I still think that might have been the case. But there is jeopardy now. There's a question over Leinster's mentality. There's a question over, can they close big games out? The wait for a trophy goes on and on and on, and the longer it goes on, the more pressure that comes with that, the more expectation. The fans are chatting, saying, "Oh, the Harry Byrne, Ross Byrne, they aren't going to take us forward now." It was 2 years ago they were telling us that these 2 guys were going to take Ireland to the next level, and that's that's the beauty and maybe the negative side of sport as well, is that guys come and go, and teams stay at the top and win trophies consistently. And Leinster are always at the top. They're always the benchmark every single season. But every team in this competition loves to beat them, loves to beat Leinster. Like, why? Because they've been the best. Was they 4 or 5, wins in the league in a row? I think maybe 4. And Ulster played them. It was during the COVID sort of era and down in the Aviva, and they hung in there for a bit. I think James Hume scored a cracking try early on in that game, and then they faded away. What's going to be different this time? I think it's just where both teams are at the minute, Kieran. Positivity, the energy, that these young Ulster guys are bringing. The fans are back on board. There's just everybody's speaking in a good way about Ulster Rugby at the minute, where better than me. Like the last 3 months ago, it was doom and gloom. Ulster the 4th best province, and they're rubbish, and no young guys coming through, and the list was endless. But just with a couple of results and a couple of these young guys playing very, very well, it's changed the whole way that people are viewing Ulster Rugby at the minute. So, long story short, to go back to your question, what's different this time round? I think it's just where both teams currently, right now, as we're speaking, are. and what their headspace is like, what their mentality is. And with Ulster beating them twice already this season, that'll give them huge confidence away from home, and a nail biter in Belfast, which they should have won by an extra, maybe 10. They were at least 10 points better in Leinster that game. And yeah, the players, John Cooney's playing really well. Billy Burns is playing well. Seems to be keeping himself fit. It'd be brilliant if McCluskey can get back in there in the centre. Ethan McElroy, I know he dropped out as well, but he's been class also. And Will Addison, who I think he's been Ulster's best player over the last 2 or 3 weeks. He has been class. And again, James Hume mentioned that last night, that if he was fit and ready to go and maybe missed a couple of weeks, he wouldn't be a shoe-in to get back into the team, because Will's been playing that well. And conversely, the Leinster side, so much chop and changing. You don't know who's playing really well week in and week out, because it's just so much change in the team. And no doubt there will be a lot more change, Kieran, getting into this weekend. So yeah, it's maybe the inconsistency that Leinster have shown over the last few weeks, and Ulster have been super consistent in their performances and been really, really competitive, which I mentioned earlier on. So that's why everybody's giving them a chance. And why not?
How do they win the game? Looking at the stats, they're bottom of the league in defenders beaten. They're 12th in meters gained. Ulster scored the lowest amount of tries of the sides left in the playoffs. They're 11th in line breaks, and they're 15th out of 16th in turnovers won on the defensive side.
Yeah, Kieran, that's I think the turnover side of thing has been a huge problem all season long. And you look at their defence, Ulster are quite happy to defend for long periods. And if you don't score early against Ulster, you have to work a long, long time to get over that try line. They make teams work so hard. And yeah, I think if you probably looked at the stats from the last 3 or 4 games, they might tell you a different story of those line breaks and those meters made, and maybe turnovers as well, definitely. So they are just playing so much better. Like, it's as simple as that. And stats go out the window when it comes to a knockout game, and stats go out the window when it comes to a Champions Cup final, and you're supposed to win by 15, 20 points, and the team that you're playing against in Toulouse just tackle their absolute hearts out, and they have a magician in there. Like, Ulster's has a couple of players that can really turn it on in a big game, and they might be a thorn in the Leinster's side as well. So yeah, they'll maybe be relishing that, Kieran, that everybody are maybe writing them off, and the stats are backing that up as well. But I'm sure it'll be addressed this week of the game plan and what they need to do to achieve a win, and they'll go after them, like, for sure.
You were there in 2013 season when they done the league double. I know you missed the final due to injury, but there's another one where they sort of went down to the RDS after giving up home advantage and couldn't close out a big game.
Yeah, I think it was Robbie Diak dropped the ball over the line, didn't he?
No, he couldn't get through Saxon. Saxon stopped him, held him up.
Yeah, held him up over the line. It was really, really tight game. But in that game, Ulster went after them. They didn't sit back and wait for Leinster to see what they did. And that's what I loved about them going down to Munster there at the weekend. They were the ones that were on the front foot. They were the ones dictating the game, dictating the physicality stakes, winning the collisions. And we haven't seen that. It's like under Dan McFarland, it was like, right, let's sit back and see what the opposition do, and then we'll go to our maul and try and physically get an upper hand on them there. And then if that doesn't work, what are we going to do next? And then the boys just went into their shells. Where now they're just going after teams, and the back row's playing brilliant. And it's weird to say that Nick Timoney seems to be the quieter one out of the back row trio. Like, Dave McCann and Cormac Ezechukwu have been the two standout back row players for Ulster in the last couple of months, which is exactly what we all want to be saying. So yeah, it's going to be an intense battle, and that's the other one, Kieran. Just the matchups, the head-to-heads. The guys from South Africa there touching about the summer series. You know, Cormac Ezechukwu played Peter O'Mahony off the park at the weekend. Peter got subbed off. Granted, it's not a decisive game like in their season, and maybe his head wasn't in the right space to put in a huge performance, but Cormac's was. Now he's got to go up against Ryan Baird or Keelan Doris or Van der Fleer or whoever's going to be playing in the number 6 jersey this weekend for Leinster. And if he dominates them as well, and Dave McCann dominates Van der Fleer or Will Connors, whoever's going to take the pitch, then it's just, you know, that's the small battles that you got to win. And that'll go a long way to dictating the end result. So the players have been playing brilliantly together, but they also got to be selfish and try and dominate their opposite man whenever they get an opportunity.
Cheers, Stevie. Thanks.
Cheers, Kieran.
Thanks, Kieran. Over to you, Derek. Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, Johnny.